Luka Doncic is one of the smoothest, shiftiest, and quickest offensive players in the game of basketball today. However, he is also one of the slowest, laziest, and stiffest defensive players in the game of basketball today. And now this makes us wonder, why is Luka so great on one side of the ball, but yet so bad on the other? It boils down to two reasons. First, the skill of defense, and second, the discipline of defense. And now, let's break it down with some film. The first reason, the skill of defense. So the same way that offense is a skill, defense is also a skill. But what does the word skill even mean? In English, skill means the ability to do something well. In basketball, there are two ways you could attain a skill. First is naturally, and a good example of that would be athleticism. So, for example, Ja Morant's bounce, De'Aaron Fox or Prime Westbrook's speed. Those are things that they didn't put much conscious effort into, but rather they were gifted with that skill by the grace of God. The second way is by working on your craft to then produce a high level of skill, similar to what we've seen out of Kobe Bryant. Spending hours in the gym, getting reps on reps to then improve your skill level. So when it comes down to Luka Doncic's offense, he is a mix of both. Naturally, in that his capacity to be able to move the way he does and read the floor in the way he does, but also through his work, because it does take a lot of repetition and experience to get to the level of skill that he is at. But on defense, not so much. And now you're probably wondering, why doesn't the same work ethic translate from offense then to defense, because you're just both moving? There's one big difference, and now let's take a look at some film. One thing that will hinder Luka Doncic's ability to move in that defensive plane is how he takes care of his body. And we know that he struggles with that. And if he wants to be able to fix that and you want to improve how you take care of yours, one thing you both must focus on is your hydration. Which brings us to today's sponsor, Element. Get a free sample pack when you go to drinklmnt.com/discipline. When you look at the movement of an offensive player, you see that their stance is more unilateral. They're more in a lunge and a split stance. And they're also moving forwards while also moving laterally, left and right, to get their angles on their defender. But if you look at a defensive player, when you guard, you have to play bilaterally. Your feet have to be one next to the other like you're in a squat. And now from here, you have to guard laterally, left and right, and also move backwards so that you can stop the offensive player from being able to get to the rim. Luka Doncic struggles tremendously when moving in that defensive plane, and we're able to see that in his Lakers debut against the Utah Jazz. So on this play, he's guarding Jordan Clarkson off the switch. And if you look at the whole floor, he has help defense to his left and to his right with Finney Smith and LeBron. And now the key is utilizing that help so you can play angles and constrict the amount of space that Jordan Clarkson could work with to be able to create a shot, whether it's for him or another teammate. Preferably not Clarkson, because he's the best scorer. So you want him to give the ball up. But what happens the second that Clarkson sizes up Luka? Notice Luka's movement. Watch his feet. Specifically, the second he hits the size up, Luka begins to hop. He begins to continuously take steps, and by the time Jordan Clarkson wants to go, Luka ends up giving up an entire lane to the middle. And so if you see at the start of that isolation, Luka's in good position. But only on that size up, you see his body raise up. And then he ends up giving up this lane because he's uncomfortable with this bilateral base where he's moving laterally to play angles. And also, he's probably also uncomfortable when it comes to guarding because he doesn't know what's going on behind him. So now what ends up happening, Jordan Clarkson attacks, is able to get his two. Another possession where Luka guards Jordan Clarkson, this time in transition. So now when Luka picks up on him, watch what he does with his body. He ends up going and hops forward into Jordan Clarkson. But as an offensive player in this situation, that's where you have to understand that they're trying to get downhill. So there's no need for you to jump up and take away their space. The key is to play angles. And the fact that Luka jumped up into his space shows a bad tendency and a low level of skill as a defender. So what happens? Luka just tries to move to his right, hits Clarkson, and that's a blocking foul. As a hooper and bucket getter myself, my favorite time to drink Element is after a hoop run. I go home, I shower, and my workday begins, and I gotta make sure I stay hydrated. So I get one of my 4 favorite flavors, which is between watermelon, raspberry, citrus, and today we're gonna go grapefruit. And all you gotta do is take one of these stick packs, rip it open just like that, get yourself a bottle to use, Like you see, I got myself right here. Drop it in. Close it up. Shake. And you're ready to go. If you start adding element into your daily routine, you don't have to worry about going to playing games, going to hoop, and catching cramps. Because the electrolytes in this, the sodium, magnesium, potassium, keep you hydrated, allow your muscles to properly contract, so now you can play at your highest level for a long duration. So make sure that you go to drinkelementdiscipline to get you a free sample pack with any purchase, and if necessary, there's a no questions asked refund policy. But if you just get those flavors I told you, there's going to be no need for that. So go make that purchase to get you that free sample. A third possession guarding Jordan Clarkson. So now Clarkson has it at the top. Kessler's going to set a screen, calls it off because Clarkson already has his desired matchup. So now what I want you to pay attention to is the second dribble off of Clarkson's drive. So when Clarkson takes 2 dribbles, he's already passed Luka. And this shows you that Luka is too slow to stay in front of Clarkson. But this could be fixed if Luka does one thing. And so if you go back to the top of this possession, if Luka Doncic plays Jordan Clarkson in a better range, he'll now be able to play a better angle by the time Clarkson takes these 2 dribbles and is getting to his spot. So what Luka has to do is back off. Instead of playing him up so tight, utilize his arms to cover up some space to discourage a shot. And then from there, if Clarkson's going to attack, now you could probably beat him with your chest up to a spot legally and make it much harder for him to make a play going to this corner where Lauri Markkanen is sitting and also Rui Hachimura. And the second reason why Luka is a bad defender is the discipline of defense. And the first part I want to talk about that is communication. And so on this play, as Collier comes down the right side, you have Luka behind that guarding John Collins. And so when Collier makes that pitch, you'll now end up seeing that Collier is going to go down to the corner, John Collins lifts up. And so in this situation, it should be a switch. But John Collins ends up ripping through and getting right past Braun. So is that really on Braun? It's not, because it's on Luka. And since at the start of the play, Luka is behind everything. So it's his responsibility, since he could see things that Braun cannot, he could see the movement of Collins, for him to communicate early and on time so Braun can prepare his body accordingly. But what ends up happening, Braun ends up continuously moving left, unaware of the switch, and John Collins rips to that left side and is able to get a layup at the rim. The other part of defensive discipline I want to talk about is Luka's carelessness. So on the offensive side, Luka makes a great play. He attacks right, he gets into the air and uses his eyes to fake a pass to the wing and really throws it to the corner and fools Keontae George, and Rui Hachimura knocks it down. But when he gets back on defense, he matches up on his matchup, John Collins. But when Collins goes to set that screen, he just ends up pushing John Collins. Now you're probably like, all right, it doesn't matter that much. It's a game against the Utah Jazz in the regular season. But what he's doing going forward is building a bad habit. A habit of having careless fouls where if it comes to the playoffs, if you make a play like that, you could have 2 in the first quarter and now your season could possibly be over because you have to take your superstar out early. So Luka has to be more careful when it comes down to guarding and not picking up these bad habits. And we see him do this all the time, these careless fouls. And it's Luka's job now to build the skill and build the defensive discipline as a defender. So now for Luka Doncic, what does it boil down to? He's got to understand also Ecclesiastes 10:10, which says, if the axe is dull and its edge unsharpened, more strength is needed, but skill will bring success. So in order for Luka to understand that he can improve on defense, he must pick up the skills so that he can become successful. But if you also look at the scripture, it talks about the axe, if its edges are dull and unsharpened. It's key that when he does go and work on his defense, he works on what he needs strategically and doesn't just go aimlessly working on his defense. So now Luka must be able to go in the lab, work on his craft, improve in the skill of defense like he improved in the skill of offense, so now he could improve. So Luka Doncic, discipline or regret? You choose.